The morning sun over Beverly Hills was bright and unforgiving, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns of the Clampett estate. Inside the grand kitchen, which was far more luxurious than any place meant for boiling collard greens should be, Daisy Moses, known to everyone as Granny, was in a state of high agitation. She moved with a briskness that belied her years, her apron fluttering like a battle flag. Before her sat a creature that looked entirely out of place on a fine mahogany chair. It was a seal, sleek and wet, blinking its large, dark eyes at her with a look of profound confusion. Granny leaned in close, her face a mask of sympathy and stubborn conviction. She spoke in a voice that was both soothing and stern, the way one might address a child who had wandered into a briar patch. She told the creature to come on in and make himself at home, addressing him as Shorty. Her heart was heavy with the belief that this poor soul was none other than their old friend Shorty Kellums, victimized by the dark arts of modern science. She informed the seal that she was going to call that doctor, the one who possessed the strange power to turn water critters back into human beings. She had even gone to the trouble of fetching a bathrobe for him, laying it over his slick shoulders as if to protect his dignity. She muttered to herself about how things would only get worse. She looked at the seal and told him that he had nobody to blame but himself. She had warned him, after all. She had told him not to let that frogman, Mark Templeton, lure him into the water. In her mind, the ocean was a place of transformation, and not the good kind. She felt he was lucky that the frogman had not turned him into a frog entirely, just as she suspected had happened to others who had ventured too deep. Granny marched over to the telephone, her fingers trembling slightly as she worked the device. She asked to speak to Dr. Klingler, her voice rising with urgency. When the voice on the other end gave her the news, her face fell. "Mercy," she exclaimed. The doctor was out of town. She thanked the person and hung up, turning back to the seal with a look of grim determination. She told Shorty Kellums that he was in for real trouble now. Since the doctor was away, there was no immediate cure for his aquatic condition. However, Granny was not one to let a guest, even a flippered one, go hungry. She told the seal to set up there at the table while she fetched some hot victuals. The kitchen began to fill with a hearty, comforting sense of corn, pork, hog jowls, and turnip greens. It was a smell that belonged in the hills, a smell of home that defied the polished marble of California. Pointed out that Mark Templeton usually fed the creature raw fish. He noted that you could tell that from 5 feet away, given the lingering aroma of the sea. This only stoked the fires of Granny's indignation. She insisted that from now on, he would be treated with decency. She told Jed that he should not feed their kind of victuals to an animal like that, but she quickly corrected him when he called the seal an animal. She insisted his name was Shorty, a name she found right fitting for the little fellow. She moved to take the bathrobe off the seal, but Jed stopped her. He argued that the creature should not be sitting in his kitchen completely naked. Granny countered that he was not supposed to wear clothes because he was a water critter, a fate she blamed entirely on the frogman. Jed tried to explain Mark's perspective, saying that when they started farming the ocean, creatures like this would be wonderful little workhorses. This was the final straw for Granny. She declared Mark Templeton to be an inhuman monster. She began to wonder aloud who the next victim would be. She asked if she would be the one turned into a turtle. Jed tried to tell her she was not making sense, but Granny was beyond logic. She announced her intention to take the little fellow back down to the place she called Seaman Town. She warned Jed to keep his hands off him and to get out of her kitchen. She told him to send Mark in to see her, because she had a few words to say to that young man. Jed, sensing the impending storm, urged her not to fly off the handle, but Granny was in no mood to be crossed. As Jed retreated to find Mark, Granny turned back to the seal. She sighed, asking why he had not listened to her and stayed out of the water. She called him a poor little goomere and lamented that he could not go back to Silver Dollar City to run a hotel looking the way he did. Outside, in the sprawling gardens near the legendary cement pond, Jethro and Mark Templeton were deep in conversation. Jethro was puzzled. He asked Mark what Granny was doing with the seal in the kitchen. Mark admitted he did not know, but he was aware that she wanted him in there as well. Mark sighed, realizing he was likely going to catch the Dickens for something he had not even done. Jethro offered to go in with him, but Mark declined. The seal had been his idea, so he would face the music alone. He knew they were unlikely to get any dinner until the matter was settled. Jethro gave him a quick tip, mentioning that Granny had named the seal Shorty. Mark entered the kitchen with a cautious smile. He greeted Granny and the seal, commenting on how good the food smelled. Granny was quick to retort that the pleasant smell certainly did not come from the seal. Mark suggested that Shorty should not be in the house and offered to put him back in the pond. Granny refused. She insisted that he was sitting right there and was going to eat hot fish. Mark tried to explain that the seal required raw fish, but Granny was adamant. She declared that he was not going back to the cement pond, and he was not eating any more raw fish. When Mark suggested taking him to the ocean instead, Granny reached her breaking point. She told the sailor boy to hear her well. She announced she was going for her shotgun. She warned him that when she returned, Shorty Kellums had better be sitting in that chair, and she meant the human Shorty Kellums, not this pitiful critter. Mark realized he had to act fast. He turned to the seal and whispered that they had to find the actual Shorty. Meanwhile, a different kind of drama was unfolding at the bank in the city. Miss Jane Hathaway was standing in the office of Milburn Drysdale, the bank president. She was holding a certified check for $48 million, charged against the account of Mr. Jed Clampett. It was a moment of triumph for her. She recalled how a similar check had been issued before, and how Mr. Drysdale, that unprincipled scoundrel, had used 2 guards to force her into a straitjacket just to stop the withdrawal. He had even told Mr. Clampett that the idea of losing the money had driven her mad. She told the young secretary, Miss Gordon, that she would take great delight in watching Mr. Drysdale scream and yell in frustration when he saw this check. Mr. Drysdale entered the room, but he was not his usual scheming self. He looked at Miss Hathaway and announced that Mr. Clampett was on his way to withdraw the $48 million. He then began a strange, dramatic confession. He claimed that as he was driving to work, he had almost had a collision with a large truck. He said his whole life had flashed before his eyes, revealing all the mean and petty things he had done. He spoke of greed and avarice, and how he had ignored the path of truth and justice. He told Miss Hathaway he was deeply sorry for his transgressions and grateful for her loyalty. He even offered her a reward of $100 and told her to take the day off. However, the moment she left, the mask slipped. Mr. Drysdale turned to Miss Gordon and asked if she liked her job. When she confirmed she did, he told her he had 2 tasks for her. First, she was to put on a nurse's uniform and pretend to be his keeper when Mr. Clampett arrived. Second, she was to stop payment on Miss Hathaway's check. He admitted that while his life had flashed before him, he had actually loved every minute of his past schemes. When Jed Clampett finally arrived at the bank, he found Mr. Drysdale acting even more peculiar. The banker was wearing a strange hat and declared himself to be the Emperor of France, Napoleon Bonaparte. He treated Miss Gordon as his Josephine and spoke of his armies retreating across the frozen steppes of Russia. He begged Jed not to withdraw his support, claiming his brave men were freezing and starving. Jed, being a kind-hearted man, did not want anyone to perish. He decided to leave the money where it was, much to the Emperor's delight. Mr. Drysdale tried to give Jed a medal, but Jed politely declined and made his exit. Back at the mansion, the confusion was reaching a fever pitch. Granny was packing her bags, determined to head back to the hills. She told Jethro she could not stay and watch Ellie Mae be married to a man who turned people into sea creatures. Jethro begged her to stay, claiming he would die if she left because he would have to eat Ellie Mae's cooking. This gave Granny a brilliant, if slightly devious, idea. She went to the kitchen where Ellie Mae and Mark were washing dishes. She praised them for being a picture of domestic bliss and asked if Ellie Mae had ever cooked a meal for Mark. When she found out she had not, Granny insisted that Ellie Mae cook a grand supper that very night. She suggested an out-of-this-world meatloaf and some of her famous large donuts. Granny knew that Ellie Mae's cooking was legendary for all the wrong reasons, and she hoped a single meal would be enough to send the frogman running for the hills. As the evening approached, the real Shorty Kellums arrived at the estate. He had found Miss Gordon, who had been fired by Mr. Drysdale, and brought her along for a swim. He was unaware of the chaos his arrival would cause. Granny, seeing Miss Gordon in her swimming attire, was momentarily confused but quickly became her friend, glad to see someone who is not a water critter. In the kitchen, Ellie Mae proudly presented her masterpiece to her father. It was a meatloaf, but she had shaped it into a giant, solid ball because she heard Mark liked meatballs. Jed looked at the heavy, dense sphere and knew no human could survive eating it. He caught Granny trying to sneak out and told her to hold it. He insisted that she get rid of the leaden meatball and make a proper meal for their guests. He warned her that supper would be late, but it had to be good. Granny took the heavy meatball outside, grumbling about Jed being a hard man. She saw the seals by the pond and, in her lingering confusion, thought they were Shorty and Elizabeth. She apologized to them for what had happened, still convinced they were humans transformed. Just then, Mr. Drysdale arrived at the mansion, looking for Miss Gordon and the check. He was still wearing his strange costume. Granny saw him and asked what kind of getup he was wearing. He asked if she had seen a beautiful brunette secretary. Granny pointed toward the pond, saying she was swimming with Shorty. When Mr. Drysdale saw the human Elizabeth and the human Shorty by the water, he was stunned. Granny looked at the group, still a bit baffled by the world of Beverly Hills, but happy that at least for now, everyone seemed to be back in their proper shape. The sun began to set over the mansion. The smell of real food finally wafted from the kitchen, and for the Clampett family, life returned to its own unique version of normal. The laughter of the family echoed through the halls, a reminder that no matter how strange the city became, they would always have each other and their home in the hills.